Thank you for joining us. This is a Wheel and Anchor webinar. Topic this week, the Algarve, which of course is the south coast of Portugal, where we'll be headed as the third segment of our sojourn program in Portugal. This is the last segment. The first one is the Azores. The second part is the Porto and the Douro Valley, and finally the Algarve. So you could do any combination of those or just one of them. The main thing is come and join us. And so I'm going to take you through a little journey today around the Algarve region. First of all, for those who are new, welcome. If this is the first time you're joining one of our Wheel and Anchor webinars, just a couple of quick words about us. We founded this community a few years back because I've been working in the travel industry for more than 30 years. And the one thing that I found is that when you got groups of people who had any affiliation to one another, they were part of a club or they're, a whole group of friends that always travel together, the dynamic is so different. And of course, as Canadians, we share certain ideals. And I've gotten a lot of feedback recently about our Traveler's Creed, which sort of embodies how we look at how travel ought to be, the best way to explore the world. And we share those ideals in this community and we bring everyone together. And that's what Wheel and Anchor is all about. And in the context of doing so, we become well-traveled and not just bucket list checkbox well-traveled, but really get to experience a lot of amazing places, cultures, foods, wines, everything around the world. And we meet a lot of great people along the way. So that's what we're up to at Wheel and Anchor. Today joining me, of course, Paula Zarnik, there on the screen as well, who is our senior trip specialist and works impossibly hard at getting everybody signed up on all of our trips. These days, it has been pure chaos, wouldn't you say, Paula? Good chaos. Yeah, exactly.
I forgot I muted myself. It's getting better, definitely.
Joel Curry is my co-founder and provides technical support and puts together these wonderful presentations. And Barb, who is Paula's compadre and is now part of our team, who gets you signed up on all of our trips. We today are taking you on a journey around the south coast of Portugal. Maybe you've been to the region, maybe you haven't. But I'm going to take you on a little journey through the Algarve, where we are headed next year. So without further ado, let's get into the program. First of all, looking at the map, as you can see from the inset, we're talking about the Algarve region, which is, and I make this mistake myself in reconciling in my mind where it is, but this is in the Atlantic Ocean, right? So this is on the west side of the Strait of Gibraltar, which of course separates Europe from Africa. Faro being the principal city, or at least the city with the airport in it, and that's where we fly into. If you're joining us just for this program, of course, if you're joining us from as part of the other segments on our sojourn program, if you're coming from Porto, we will likely come down by overland by rail, passing through all the wonderful countryside of Portugal down to the south coast. The program we've divided into two stops, and those of you that know me, I love to be able to stay in one place and do exploring in sort of hub and spoke kind of style. But the Algarve is actually about 155 kilometers wide from one side to the other. And as you can imagine, being a rocky coastline, the roads are quite windy and narrow. There are some highways, but the point is that you can't really do it justice by staying in one place. So we're going to spend the first part in a little town that's not far from Faro in the so-called eastern part of the Algarve. It's called Olhau, and from there we'll be able to go all the way over basically to the Guadiana River, which forms the border to Spain, visit some lovely towns in the eastern part, and then the second half of the journey we will be heading over to a town called Cargueo. You probably haven't heard of it. The more famous towns in the area, the more touristy towns are Albufeira and Portimao and Lagos. But we like Cargueo because it's a smallish town close to the beach. And from here, we can access all the spectacular scenery of the Western Algarve. So let's have a quick look day by day. And as I say, we're going to start off in the eastern part of the Algarve. We're going to fly into Faro. There are connections, unfortunately, no direct flights. At one point, there was actually, I think it was Air Transat that flew between Toronto and Faro, but I don't believe that service exists anymore, certainly not since COVID. So you'll have to use a gateway like Lisbon or Frankfurt. They fly down to Faro. There's a few different ways to get there. So it's not too difficult of a place to get to. From there, we will be picked up, of course, as usual, and brought to this lovely little village called Olhau. And the nice thing here about Olhau is, I mean, it's known as a cubist city. And so cubist architecture, of course, when you think of a cube, it's all of that, but they have a very rigorous set of sort of rules that they have to adhere to, you know, these mosaic clay floors, and you know, the way that the windows are a certain sort of proportion of the room. There's different rules that these structures have to follow, and having maintained this wonderful tradition of cubism has made it quite a special place and a lovely place to hang out for a few days. There's obviously free time, like we have built into the program, to just, you know, wander the streets. We'll of course visit the fish market there, which is, you know, for which the town is best known, and really get a great sense without being in one of the touristic meccas of the Algarve. And this was the one thing when we were putting together this program, is that we wanted to show you the highlights without staying in sort of the thick of it all. And Olhau is certainly perfect for that. Of course, after we have our arrival day, we get caught up on from, you know, jet lag and the overnight flight and all the rest of it. We're going to take some time to explore, obviously, the town together with our local guide. We'll see the Mercado Municipal, which of course it'll be timely because it'll be Saturday on the second day of our trip. And the Saturday market here is one of the finest, with, you know, a broad sampling of fish, even if you aren't a fish lover, but just to see this market truly is impressive. We'll also head over to a town called Almansil, which is sort of a kind of a jet set town, quite beautiful. Its claim to fame is that it has 3 Michelin star restaurants. We won't stay there that long, though. We'll head on and visit this lovely town called Estoy, with a 19th century Rococo palace. You can see it pictured here, and as well as some Roman ruins. The whole region of the Algarve carries its influences, as does anywhere in Europe, but from, obviously, there was a Roman period, there was an Islam period prior to the 13th century. The Moors were in this area. So you see all these different influences. And so while it's best known for the architecture and the natural wonders like we get here in Ria Formosa, as I say, the history and all these different influences, I think what makes it culturally a very, very interesting place to go. So we'll then catch a little bit of the natural side of the Algarve by visiting Ria Formosa. This is a massive wetland area that is, you know, little sandbanks and sort of islands and canals. We'll actually do a boat tour around here to take in some of this, you know, unique scenery. And again, they're quite different here because the landscape, as you can see from the picture, is flat. But you have these little bays and estuaries. The colors are amazing. The flora and fauna is quite interesting. If we're lucky, we'll get to see the region's famous bird, the so-called sultan hen, which actually, it's basically a fluffy white chicken. But it's really kind of cool. And so we'll go back in the afternoon to Olhau. You'll have time. There's some labyrinths in the old quarter there. Really, again, it's a great place to come back to every day, because it's kind of a cozy little town. We'll then head over to the farthest easternmost, I'm not sure that's English, to the easternmost part of the Algarve, close to the Spanish border. We'll take in a little town of Cachela Vela, which, when you're here, you know, it's sort of reminiscent of a little bit of Greece, because all the buildings are white and blue, and they've been able to maintain this sort of design actually for centuries. And here you get a panorama over the sandbars, the coastline, which is again these wide sandy beaches. We'll go to a town called Tavira, which is the Venice of the Algarve, and has an amazing Roman bridge with, I think, 13 arches that crosses over the River Gilao. We'll culminate the afternoon by attending a Fado concert. If you've been to Portugal before, you've no doubt seen Fado, and the good Fado shows the emotion that gets put in by the singers. It's often a family thing in conjunction with a restaurant, with food. But all in all, I think it'll be a brilliant day in the eastern part of the Algarve. We'll then head over to Faro. This is, as I say, one of the largest cities in the Algarve. It's where the airport is. It's kind of like the hub, and it's here. Amongst all the more modern buildings that were, sort of built as tourism exploded in the area, but it's here that we can see the walls of the city, so that the old city is surrounded by walls out of the 9th century, and it's the Moorish architecture, the Moorish influences that are the most prevalent in Faro. This was actually the last town, as I was saying earlier, that the different influences that came in, that was still under Islamic influence right up until the middle part of the 13th century. So you can see examples of that. And one of the favorite stops here is the Igreja do Carmo, which is a bone church. It's a whole chapel that is made from human bones. Sounds a little bit morbid, but it's actually really, really cool if you stop to pause in these places. I find they're quite memorable. So, we'll spend a good part of a day taking in Faro, which is not really far from Olhau. And although, a lot of people sort of head here on their holidays, I think you'll appreciate why we picked a smaller place like Olhau. But nevertheless, after the first part of our journey, we will then have to continue. We're going to move to the western part of the Algarve, where the scenery is quite different. This is where we get the rocky coastline that, if you've seen pictures of the Algarve in National Geographic or wherever, this is what you will expect. And we've picked Cargueo because, as you can see here, these very cool, very white, with red splotches buildings built into this into these rocks not far from the beach. So picturesque. It is a little bit up and down, of course, going through this town, but we're not far. We're staying at a lovely place not far from the center of town, not far from the beach. And we will explore. Let me go back, because I just wanted to mention on the way there, and as the old saying goes, half the fun is getting there. We're going to stop at an artist village where they make some of the best pottery from the region. And we're going to have one of the gastronomic highlights of the trip. There is a wine estate that we managed to come up with. I have not been here, but I've heard only rave reviews, called Quinta dos Vales. And we're going to get a 3-course tasting menu with the wines that are quite renowned, at least within Portugal, together with lunch. And so that'll be the trip to Cargueo. We'll check in here and obviously be able to sort of soak in this lovely town, which in May is going to be the weather, I think, is perfect. The Algarve, people flock, of course, from other parts of Europe, from the UK and so on, to the Algarve in the summertime, but it can get incredibly hot. So May is, I think, a perfect time of the year. The weather's likely to be in the sort of the low 20s, maybe even the mid 20s, a little cooler in the evening. Perfect time, I think, to go to the Algarve, and you don't have the tourist crowds that you do in the summertime. So, of course, it's from here that we can go out to the very westernmost tip of not only Portugal, but actually all of Europe. The main town, of course, is Sagres, which has quite a magnificent fortress to it. But of course, as we like to do as travelers, is go to the most extreme spots. We'll head out to Cabo de São Vicente, which you see here, the westernmost point of Europe. And well, the picture does more justice than what I can describe. The scenery, as you look back along the coastline of the Algarve, is truly, truly amazing. We'll also make a stop this day in Lagos, which has the, how should we say, less prestigious distinction, where it used to be the largest slave market in Europe. So a lot of history there, a lot of, understanding about the slave trade and how that all came to influence this, this whole part of Europe. I mean, it's quite sobering to think about it, to hear a little bit about it. And the town of Lagos itself, though, is really, really cool, and cobblestone streets and all those wonderful things that you can imagine. We'll spend a day up in the mountains as well. So the Algarve is not just coastline, but as you move into the interior up to the north, you get some lovely mountains, not like the Alps mountains, but nevertheless rolling hills and scrubby forests, quite different landscape than what you'll find on the coast. And we'll head to one place here called the Caldas de Monchique, which is a mountain village that has a hot springs for which people come from everywhere because of what hot springs do, all of those curing properties that they say is in the water. You'll get to taste some of the water, but perhaps more appealing to many will be tasting the local brandy, which is called Medronjo. And the locals seem to think that it's super famous. To be quite honest with you, I'd never heard of it before. But nevertheless, that is their claim to fame: hot water and brandy. And as I say, we'll be high up. We'll get up to about the highest point in the whole Algarve region at about 900 meters above sea level. And from the town of Foia, which is at the top point of our tour today, if it's a clear day, we'll be able to see right out to the Atlantic Ocean. So a very scenic day, again, a different side to the Algarve altogether. And as we get towards the end of our trip, the last full day, we're going to visit, we're going to go out on the sea finally, because of course we've spent all this time, and although we'll do a boat trip through the estuaries outside of Oahu, it's here at Beniguil, or we'll leave from the port of Portimao, and we'll get on a boat that looks a little bit something like the Mayflower. It's one of those how do I describe it? It's not a schooner. It looks like the Mayflower. It's like a double-masted old ship, very cool. And we'll slowly sail along this coastline, and it'll be breathtaking. And the most memorable way to end the trip along the Algarve, we'll pass through sea caves and little beaches nestled into the rocks, fishing villages. If we're lucky, we'll spot some dolphins. It'll be a beautiful, beautiful morning. After the cruise in the afternoon, we'll visit the region called Algarve Seco, which is basically has the whole area has formations like you see in the picture, these massive cave structures on the ocean. One in particular, which is called the Doll. It's this massive inverted conical shaped rock that like you see in the picture here. It's why this is one of the most famous coastlines, the most celebrated coastlines in the world. So we'll cap the whole thing off with a terrific family farm dinner, which will be our farewell dinner at a wine estate between Sagres and where we're staying. And that will wrap up our trip through the Algarve. And from there, we'll make our way back to Canada or to somewhere else in Europe. So that's the overview of the day by day. Let me go briefly through the program. First of all, our pricing here. So I think for 9 days in the Algarve, it's pretty compelling. We have some lovely hotels, and of course our usual scope of services, which is all of the transportation and guiding in English and a local host. And then we'll have either lunches or dinners each day, including some fantastic meals like the one that we'll have at the wine estate. So all in all, it's a pretty great program. Of course, separate is, as always, airfare and insurance, both of which are necessary for obvious reasons. Talking about airfare, getting in and out of Faro at the moment, as I say, we've been pretty lucky with airfare so far. Again, talking about sort of 6 months out in advance and on, prices have stayed relatively in line with what they've been historically. So you should be able to get down to Faro for about $800 to $1,000 from the east coast of Canada or the east side of Canada, and a little bit more if you're flying out from the west. So now it's time for questions and answers. And hopefully, Paula, we've got a few questions coming in. Of course, please, if you're always welcome to email Paula or Barb or me if you have any questions. We're happy to answer them. And in the meantime, have any come in?
We have, I think you should touch on the weather. That's always a question that we get asked.
Weather again. I did stick it in the middle, but in case anybody wasn't, I just confirm the weather again. So the Algarve is on the south coast of Portugal, but as you saw on the map, it's actually relatively far north. It's not nearly as far south as the Costa del Sol in Spain. And so I think it's an optimal destination in springtime. So we're going in the middle of May, which will be fabulous. You can expect relatively dry weather in May in Portugal, of course, being where it is, can always rain. Temperatures likely to be in the low to mid 20s in the day, and perhaps in the high teens sort of during the evening. So actually great touring weather at that time of the year.
Perfect. Another question, what's the group size for this trip?
So the group size, as with any of our sojourn trips and most of our trips, we're sort of, if I was to guess at this point, it'll be sort of 12 to 16 people. We will never take more than 20 on a program like this. So yeah, but typically it'll probably be around 12 to 16 people. Okay,
perfect. That's all the questions that I've had come in so far. So
we hear from David about Air Transat flying Toronto to Faro. There you go. So it may be an option as well to fly directly from Toronto, which of course would be very convenient if it's still flying at that time of the year. So we'll appreciate that comment, David. I see one other point here. Bob asked about when are the Azores and Porto. So yeah, just to reiterate on that point. So the Azores program begins, and I don't have the date right in front of me, but it is
April 20, I want to say April 29th to May 4th, or April 27th, May 4th.
On our website. And it starts at the end of April and goes to the beginning of May. And then we have Porto in the Douro Valley, which is immediately prior to this. So these programs are all back to back. The idea being that you could theoretically do all three of them, the Azores, Porto, and the Algarve, or you can do any one or two. Perfect. Is that questions?
That is everything.
Alrighty, good. Well, then I must have done a pretty good job. Thank you for joining us. Of course, as I say, if you have any further questions, do drop us a note, send us an email, give us a call. We love to hear from you. And Mary asked if you wanted to do all three. You can absolutely do all three. That's so, but give us a call. And anybody that's interested in knowing more or how it all works and so on, that's what we're here for. We'd love to hear from you. And join us next week, where we will be talking about a little cooler climate, Iceland, and a special circumnavigation program I put together. It's 9 nights on a cruise around Iceland and 4 nights in the capital of Reykjavik. So that webinar next week on the 29th of September on our usual day, Thursday, where I'll be coming to you from Europe. So take care. Thanks again for joining us. Please come along. The Algarve is amazing. If you haven't been, I'm sure you'll love it a lot. So I look forward to seeing you there. And if not, look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Have yourselves a great day.